All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that might not be the most, exciting topic, but super important.
Yeah.
Especially, if you're going through a big life change, like a divorce. We're talking credit.
Oh, yeah.
And, you sent in this document from the Federal Trade Commission
Mm.
all about navigating credit during divorce. And I got to say, it's kind of eye-opening.
Oh, for sure. Divorce is already like so emotionally complicated.
Yeah.
Right, and then you add in the financial stuff. It just gets like way more stressful. And this FTC document, it really like points out those things that people don't always think about.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
right off the bat, they start with this story about Mary and Bill, right?
Mhm.
They get divorced. And the divorce decree says Bill is responsible for the debt from their joint credit card.
Right.
Seems simple enough, right?
Seems straightforward.
But here's the catch. Bill doesn't pay.
Oh.
And the creditors, they come after Mary.
Oof. That's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people think the divorce decree, like, it's legally binding for creditors, but it's not.
Really?
Yeah, it's a super common misunderstanding. Creditors, they're really only looking at, like, the initial agreement on that account.
Hmm.
And in this case, with a joint account, both people are equally responsible no matter what that divorce decree says.
Wow. So even if you think, okay, I'm in the clear because of the divorce agreement, you're not. You might still be on the hook. That's kind of scary.
It is. It can be.
So let's break this down a little bit. What are the different types of credit accounts
Mm-hmm.
that the people should really be aware of, especially thinking about like in the context of a divorce?
Okay, well, you've got your individual accounts and your joint accounts.
Hmm.
Individual is, well, pretty self-explanatory. It's in your name. Your credit history is what gets it approved. And you're the one responsible for any debt.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty simple. What about joint accounts? I think those are the ones that get, really messy.
Oh, absolutely. Joint accounts, couples use those a lot because they can, like, improve your chances of getting approved, especially if one person's got a better credit history.
Right.
But the downside is that both people are equally responsible for that debt,
Right.
no matter who actually made the charges. That's what happened to Mary in the FTC example.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like the creditors are going to stick to the original terms of that agreement.
Right.
But it's really important for people to realize that a divorce decree doesn't just override that initial contract that you made with the creditor.
Exactly.
So say somebody's going through a divorce
Yeah.
and they have a joint account.
Uh-huh.
What should they do?
Well, ideally, closing those joint accounts or converting them to individual accounts,
Okay.
like before or during the divorce process. That's like the safest bet. But here's the thing. Creditors, they don't have to close an account just because a couple's getting divorced.
Really?
Yeah. And they also might not agree to convert a joint account to an individual one.
So you're saying even if you want to separate your finances,
Yeah.
the creditor could just say no.
Yeah, that's right.
That seems a little unfair, especially like in a divorce situation.
Right.
Why wouldn't they have to let you separate those accounts?
Well, it's all about like risk for the creditor. They approve the credit based on both your finances together.
Right.
If you take one person off, they might see that as riskier.
Oh, okay.
Like the other person might not pay, especially if they've got a worse credit history.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm starting to see why this whole credit and divorce thing is such a minefield.
it can be.
So what if you can't close the account or convert it? What are your options then? Are you just stuck?
Well, not necessarily. Even if you can't close or convert, you can still try to minimize any new shared debt.
Oh.
That might mean like freezing the account or setting spending limits, but you got to talk to the creditor directly about that.
Right.
And it's a good idea to like write down any agreements or conversations you have with them, just in case.
Yeah, documentation, always a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially when things are, complicated.
Right.
But closing an account, that can affect your credit score too.
Yeah, that's true. Especially if it's an older account, one you've had for a while.
Right.
Closing accounts, it affects things like how long you've had credit and your credit utilization ratio.
Okay, hold on. For our listener who, might not be like a credit expert, can you quickly explain like what that credit utilization ratio thing is and why it matters?
Sure. So basically, it's how much of your available credit you're actually using.
Okay.
Lower is better, generally. Shows you're not relying too much on credit.
Right.
So if you close an account, especially one with a high limit, that ratio could go up, and that could actually lower your score.
Got it. So it's kind of a balancing act, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to protect yourself from any potential like future debt on a joint account,
Mm-hmm.
but you also don't want to mess up your credit score.
Exactly. And that's where things can get really tricky.
Speaking of tricky, the FTC document also mentions authorized users. What are those, and how do they play into all of this divorce stuff?
So an authorized user is basically someone you let use your credit card.
Okay.
They get a card with their name on it, they can make charges, but they're not legally responsible for that debt.
Okay.
The person whose name is actually on the account, they're the one ultimately responsible for all charges, even ones the authorized user makes.
So even though the authorized user isn't, like, technically responsible for the debt, what they do can still affect the main account holder's credit score.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. How much they spend, whether they pay on time, all that impacts the account holder's credit score.
Okay. This is a lot to think about. It seems like every decision about credit during a divorce has these, like, long-term consequences.
That's true.
So besides understanding, like, individual accounts, joint accounts, authorized users, what else should someone going through a divorce, like, really keep in mind about credit?
Well, one really big thing is even with individual accounts, things can get complicated if you're in a community property state.
Oh. Yeah. The community property states. Always a curveball, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we should remind our listener which states those are.
Absolutely. We're talking about Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin.
Okay. So if you're getting divorced in one of those states, what should you know about how credit works?
Well, in these states, any debt you took on during the marriage is generally considered both spouses' responsibility,
Really?
even if the debt is technically only in one person's name.
So even if, like, your name's not on the account,
Mm-hmm.
you could still be held responsible for the debt
Yeah,
just because you're married.
that's right.
That seems like a recipe for a lot of, like, arguments and headaches.
It definitely can be. That's why it's super important to understand the laws in your state and to talk openly and honestly with your spouse about money, especially during a divorce.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
Different types of credit accounts, how those divorce decrees actually affect credit responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, those special considerations for community property states.
Right.
But I have a feeling there's still so much more to unpack here,
Oh, definitely.
especially when it comes to actually protecting your credit during and after a divorce.
Absolutely. We've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn, and it really depends on your specific situation.
Okay, well, let's not keep our listener in suspense any longer.
Yeah.
We'll dive into those proactive steps and strategies in our next segment. Stay tuned.
Can't wait.